This is Ilui Nishmat Ishti Aliza Faiza Bat Yosef Naim Vesalima. Now the big question we ask is, what makes us unique? What makes us stand out amongst all the nations? Of course we know they don't like us because we gave the world a conscience. But aside from that, there's a lot of jealousy, there's a lot of fear, because they do not understand us. But what is the secret? The secret is in our daily tefillot, in our daily prayers. Now, we come along and it's almost like self-hypnosis. In fact, it is self-hypnosis, because what we're doing is that spaced repetition. We're repeating the same prayers all day and every day. And we've already learned the inner meaning of each thing we say, each bracha we're saying during the day. Every part of our prayers flashes into our mind that reason. But what else flashes into our mind? And that is, everyone is a personal request to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because when, especially Shemona Esrei, you see a problem and you start thinking of your own problem, because all of us during prayer, we have our hang-ups and we have our tragedies in our lives, difficulties, challenges, anger, and completely lost many, many times. And therefore all of our egos goes away. And during that time we're frank with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, because we know that Hashem is willing to listen to us, cares about us, and also will keep our inner secrets to Hashem himself. And that it gives us the confidence during the day, because that's what we need. Who can we tell? Many, many things we can't be frank about because we get embarrassed. A lot of people that are quiet or also have egos, the more they show an ego, the more they have the inferiority complex. But it's also something else. I have several followers who I've been teaching the last 2-3 years, and they want to know more and more and more. And I say, look, you will never be satisfied. The more you know, the more you want to know. And it's exactly the same as this. The more comfort you seek in tefillah and other things in your life, the more you want, the more you need. And therefore you want to come back again for more. We have the Ketoret. The Ketoret puts us in a trance. I mean, we say it so many times, we have to imagine the smell. And we say it so many times, that Ketoret. And after all, what is it? It puts us in a trance, and it's a drug. A drug like anything else. It could be drugs, alcohol, wine, any obsession, drinks and gambling, and other things as well. And so that is, to those people who take the drugs, as well as us, it takes us out of that reality into our inner reality, and we can be frank and get the protection from Hashem. And that's really, really what happens to us. And during the day, when we're saying our brachot, we say mincha, we say mariv, I've already explained to you what we're saying during Shemona Esrei or the Ashrei. You have it all inside of you. So there's not anything extra or unique to tell you except the obvious. And that is Birchat HaMazon. The Birchat HaMazon is a commandment, and you should eat and you should be satisfied. So we're commanded to say Birchat HaMazon. Or Bracha Achrona, the last blessing is the shorter one. And the two types of shorter ones. And then we come to Mincha. We know that that is also something we have to pray in the afternoon, because our forefathers prayed. They instituted the prayer. We also know in Ma'ariv. Ma'ariv, of course, there's a difference between the morning and the evening. In the morning we said Ma'avir Laila Yom, from night to day. And in the evening, obviously, it's from day till night. But it's a consciousness that there is a great guide in this world who's putting there. And that's what we get from our prayers. But on top of that, we have all sorts of other things in our lives during the day. And many of us make a mistake. Even people who are religious believe they are. They will say about this mitzvah or that mitzvah, I don't need to keep that. That's from the Middle Ages. It's no longer necessary. What for? But that is downhill, and we have to be very, very careful of it, because it adds more and more and more. We deny one mitzvah it means we're not really accepting all the rest, because we were given those mitzvot in totality. So it's downhill, and we have to be very, very careful. On the other hand, what makes us unique? What gives the Jew a special brain? It is the concentration of the tefillah. It is a complete reliance in Hashem. It's knowing that whatever happens, we can't control, and we must accept realities. And Hashem will help us as much as it's good for us, or in the totality that we do not understand. The Baal Shem Tov said many, many things, but a very interesting thing, he said, look, no, we have freedom of choice, and yet it's difficult to understand it because the Kadosh Baruch Hu knows everything we're going to do. So he says, I don't have an answer. And if you're going to say to me, what do you mean you don't have an answer? That's right. And if you don't like it, don't ask the questions. You just carry on. And that is very, very powerful for us to think of. We just carry on. But then again, what makes us unique is the tefillah. It's learning Torah. It's the attraction, and we want to come again and again and again. The more we do it, the more we want it. It doesn't always work out with schedule. It doesn't work out. But we want as much as we can. We're hungry. So it's the Torah. It's the Kabbalah. It's all the traditions of our forefathers. All of that builds up the Jewish brain, as we have in Shemona Esrei. We have chokhmah, wisdom, then understanding, and then a deeper insight, knowing what's underneath everything, all the secrets of the world. That is what the Jew lives with and has developed the Jewish brain over the years. After all, look, I mentioned before that people say certain brachot in the Middle Ages. We're living in 2020. Look at the Jewish mind in 2020. All the Nobel Prize winners, the largest percentage of inventors of all sorts of things, and Google and Facebook and Waze and so many other things that everybody is part of everybody's life, the whole world's life, every single day. That came from Jewish brains. Yes, non-Jews can do it. I didn't say they can't. But on the other hand, we have a very large and unusual percentage. Now that puts fear in a lot of the non-Jews because they do not understand it. They don't understand it at all. Also, they see on the outside a Jew might not be religious at all. And yet, they don't know that he goes Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. Regardless, after all, I'm a Jew. We mentioned that a couple of days ago. I'm a Jew. I'm not religious. I don't believe. But I'm a Jew. Where else should a Jew go on Yom Kippur or on Rosh Hashanah? And so they look at that. They don't know what's in the inside. And a Jew behaves. He's spiritually different. And you know, they spoke to a well-known psychiatrist who for 60 years worked on dealing with drug addicts, all sorts of addiction. And he was asked, how would you sum up, in a few words, what all these addicts have which is unique from other people? So he says, number one, they have spirituality. Number two, they have terrible inferiority complexes which they are ashamed of and they try to hide. It comes from their childhood, their siblings, their friends, their teachers, and also from society today. They feel lost. They see the egos. They see people who are not honest. They see people who say one thing and do another thing, and they do it purposely, and they know, and they feel uncomfortable and angry. And so therefore they're confused, and it affects them. And it almost gives them a complex because they're not participating in that, and people don't understand. Now, all of what I've told you is from the Kabbalah. All that I've told you is in the Torah. However, it's interesting, the psychiatrists, of course, psycho means soul. That's what they're dealing with. And at the end of the day, whether they like to think of it or not. And so it's spiritual. And where do they get it from? We remember with Adler and Freud both said when they started to learn Kabbalah, wow, this is a gold mine for our work psychology. And then I would like to tell you a short story. The story is about somebody who was brought up in a very religious home in Zsoj, they spell it S-Z, by the way, Zsoj, in Hungary. And there, in this religious home, and he went to yeshiva, and he learned, and he had a vast knowledge. 1944, the Jews were all rounded up, and I mean, this was a powerful community, well settled in. They were more Hungarian than the Hungarians, like in so many other countries. And they were shipped off to Auschwitz and Birkenau, and there they were murdered. They were gassed or turned into slaves to non-people. And he managed to survive the war, but he was very angry with God. And when he came out, he says, I don't want to have anything to do with it. In fact, he became anti-religious. Well, he grew to be a professor of philosophy, and he introduced himself when he visited Australia, and he came as a religious man. And the rabbi invited him for Shabbat. And at the Shabbat table, he says, I want to tell you my story. And he told everything that I told you till now. And then he says, what happened with me was this. I turned against everything. In fact, I come from the Academy of Science in Tel Aviv. And you know what that means. All left-wing and not religious, anti-religious. And he says, I was so anti-religious, I used to give lectures and talks and write books, quoting from the Torah and the Gemara, and taking all the negative things and showing how stupid it all is and what are you believing from. And it's from the Middle Ages and the desert and not for us today. And he says, oh, what happened to me? He says, one day, my mentor, the professor that I learned for, he had his 90th birthday, so he invited me to his house. And then he said to him, look, I want you to come into my library. I want to show you something. And he says, I want you to know that I also come from Lodz. And I also come from Hungary. And I was also brought up in a religious family. Read this letter that I have from the Rebbe, the Chabad Rebbe Schneerson. And he took out a letter from his desk, and it was handwritten, which is very unusual because the Rav usually dictates and people type it and he signs it because it's quicker. But what did he do? He had written this by hand. The professor, he says, I was so angry with what the Rav represents and all of this hypocrisy, and he shouldn't try to spread all of these lies. And so I wrote a frank letter attacking and giving all my arguments that I give in the book. I was very, very rude, but I was very, very angry. And I thought I'd never get a reply. Suddenly, to my great surprise, I get a reply from the Rebbe, and it's written in his own handwriting. And he says as follows, it wasn't a long letter. And this is what I read. That's the religious man who came to Australia. And he says, this is what I read. He never said a word, he just read it. And in there, the Rebbe says, he was very, very respectful. And he said, dear professor, I so much appreciate your analysis and what you sent to me. And I see that you come from Lodz. I recognize that name. If you come from there, were you in, there were famous religious families there. And there was also, perhaps, I don't know, there was another family with the same name that were completely irreligious. I've got no idea. He says, but I want you to think of one thing, whatever explanation you don't have, whatever you don't understand, don't try to understand. Just think of your roots. Your roots are in your DNA, your father, your grandfather, your great-grandfather, the whole of your family. It's deep down inside of you. Do not think of anything else. And that's all he said. When he saw how the Rebbe's attitude as a religious man, he understood him, but on the other hand, he told him, all is very well, but your roots, you're part of a chain. And you know what? I started to go to Chabad. I went to visit the Rebbe. I sang with him, I danced with him, I cried with him, as we've heard that story before, so many people it happened to. And I became religious. And he says, I want you to read the letter a second time. And he said it had the same effect on him. And he too went to visit New York, and he too joined in everything that his mentor did. And he says, that is why I'm religious. And we bear this in mind, that our power is our roots, our DNA. It goes back in time. Our chokhmah, binah v'dat, our wisdom in understanding and knowing what's underneath everything and the secrets of the world. It comes from that constant roots going out from generation to generation. That's what we all have to remember, and we have to understand, and we have to accept. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you.